Next, we have a rather complex question. And you can tell because the next 6 slides are going to be devoted to both the question and the answer. So let's go through this slowly. And it starts with a clinical situation. A patient with hematemesis presents for an EGD. The patient is found to have esophageal varices, and therefore ligation of those esophageal varices is performed using bands placed via a band ligation device. The question starts out by saying, what is the appropriate ICD-10 PCS body system for esophageal varices? Is it the gastrointestinal system, or is it lower veins? And right off the bat, it gives you pause, because that's a very odd question for coding clinic to be asking. The questioner goes on to point out, in ICD-10 PCS, ligation is coded to the root operation occlusion. Therefore, if we use table 06L, and you recall from your training that 0 is the med-surg section, 6 is lower veins, and L is occlusion. If we use 06L for occlusion of the lower veins, there is the appropriate body part for and a device value for the bands. I want to stop right there and say one of the questions everyone has is, you're talking about the esophageal vein, why would it be classified as a lower vein? Because we know that the rule is that, the dividing point in the body for upper and lower is the diaphragm. And the fact of the matter is that, oddly enough, if you look it up, the esophageal vein originates below the diaphragm, hence making it technically a lower vein. And that's not a point that we get to debate. That's part of ICD-10 structure, and coding clinic, in fact, supports that. However, there's 2 problems with this supposition made by the questioner. However, there's no approach value for via natural or artificial opening endoscopic. However, if we use 0DL, the table for occlusion of the gastrointestinal system, and use esophagus for the body part, there is the appropriate approach value, but there is no device option. So here's the real question. What is the appropriate ICD-10 PCS code assignment for endoscopic banding of esophageal varices, given the problems posed by the person presenting the question? And you know that you're in a little bit of trouble when, in the course of answering the question, coding clinic starts out by giving a clinical and anatomy lesson. Esophageal varices are enlarged veins of the esophagus, which can spontaneously rupture and cause severe bleeding. Endoscopic banding of these esophageal varices involves completely occluding the blood flow and meets the root definition of the operation occlusion. The lumen of the esophageal vein is being banded, not the esophagus. So you start to get a sense of the direction that they're going in with their answer. The index under ligation states C occlusion. And this is actually a good time to point out that the index in the PCS classification is really an exquisite document. It does a lot of translation of things, as you see here, turning ligation, if you don't know the root operation, sending you to C occlusion. But here is the answer. Assign the following ICD-10 PCS code. 06L34CZ. 0 is the med-surg section, 6 is the lower vein, L is occlusion, 3 is the esophageal vein, 4 is the approach, percutaneous endoscopic, C tells us the device, the bands, and Z tells us that there's no qualifier. The next paragraph goes on to defend the answer. The ICD-10 PCS tables currently do not use approaches containing the phrase via natural or artificial opening for body parts in the cardiovascular system. And basically what this paragraph tells us is that there's an oversight in the PCS classification that doesn't allow us to code this one correctly using ICD-10 PCS. The answer goes on to point out that the use of this approach for blood vessel body parts could change over time if requests for additional codes are made through the ICD-10 PCS coordination and maintenance process. Basically, the answer that's being provided to us is that because there is no correct code, the advice is to use the wrong code until the problem is corrected, not unlike the discussion we had about diabetes a little bit earlier. And I reiterate that while this is mostly to bring these problems to your attention, and again, I completely mean that this is not a criticism of the classification per se, but I want to bring these to your attention because this, like diabetes that we talked about earlier, with ketoacidosis, a commonly reported condition, this is going to be a commonly reported procedure, and we need to have a means by which to report it until the situation gets corrected. But as your curious coders would always do, you would run these codes through the grouper to see what the reimbursement implications might be. In ICD-9, you see what the codes are. You recognize those. Alcoholic cirrhosis, bleeding esophageal varices, which is a major comorbid condition. Endoscopic ligation of esophageal varices, procedure code 42.33, giving you a reasonable weight of 1.7150. But if you run these same codes through the ICD-10 grouper, this is what you get. You get DRG 981 that has a cost weight of 4.9. Bit of an aberration, but wanted to bring that to your attention. Also wanted to comment that this was done using grouper version 31 that is currently available to look up ICD-10 codes. We're told that there's a version 31R, a revised version of the ICD-10 grouper that's due out any day. I would recommend, and I will certainly personally check this out to see if this is one of the groupings that will be revised at that point. But I did want to bring that to your attention.